Let's just start with Pope Francis' death, announced yesterday on Easter Monday, after his first appearance in public after a very long time, very long illness. It's been revealed that he didn't die of pneumonia as many suspected. 88-year-old man, very, very unwell for a very long time. I'm quite surprised by how many people were surprised that he did die yesterday morning. In terms of, we've got the funeral is going to be on Saturday. The cardinals are already meeting in Rome to decide, all the funeral arrangements, and then of course they can have a few weeks to decide who the next pope is going to be. In terms of the legacy of Pope Francis, someone who has been very political, as many popes have been in recent decades. I'm thinking Pope John Paul II, crucial role in terms of, as a Polish pope himself, criticising the communist regime. But in terms of his woke politics, he spoke out, on every woke issue, whether it was refugees, whether it was Gaza, whether it was climate change, gay, LGBT rights and the like. But at the end of the day, and you spoke about poverty, and you're supposed to be this very sort of, the representation of the poor. But did he do anything to actually further any of those causes? Did he tackle, for instance, the big issue that has been afflicting the church for decades now, the issue of the paedophile priests and tackling that sexual abuse legacy?
Well, I think his legacy is clearly just a more divided Catholic Church. I mean, as you say, the various kind of political causes, that he's involved himself in over the years are very controversial, whether it's climate, whether it's the question of gay people within the church and what that means, what kind of posture should be taken towards them, whether it's various geopolitical issues. He was quite outspoken on Gaza, he was quite outspoken on Ukraine, and in ways that, again, large swathes of the Catholic Church would potentially disagree with. At the same time, it's not as if he pleased the more reformist or even the kind of more progressive voices even outside of the church, because at the end of the day, the Pope is still Catholic. He's not going to embrace homosexuality. He's not going to embrace women priests, for instance. So it's one of those things where he leaves a divided church, but also not having achieved much from what people
and
might
you
hope
say
he would.
Massive big divisions between this, what's called the globe, the Western nations and the global South, as people say. Poorer countries with very much non-Western values. It's one of my battles I keep having with people all the time. People about universal human rights and values. No such thing. These don't exist at all. They are basically an entire creation of Western liberal democracy. The views on women's rights, gay rights, anything else, these are entirely Western creations. They do not exist in large parts of the world. And the Catholic Church actually, spans both very, modern liberal states and also, so I'm sorry, let's use the term, backward countries that still think, homosexuality should be illegal and women are basically the property of their men. I'm sorry, call me old-fashioned for thinking that's backward, but I do. But one of the things I do almost admire the Catholic Church for, as someone who has no religious beliefs whatsoever, is at least they're kind of, and to a certain extent, standing firm against sort of modernity in some ways, as much as I'm appalled by the fact that, the male pope will be chosen by an entirely large group of men. There are no women involved. But if that's what your church teachings tell you, then fill your boots. I don't care. It's got nothing to do with me. I don't get involved in. As long as people aren't breaking the law and allowing the abuse of children, and that's happening across the board in every church and in non-church organisations, it's nothing to do with me. But we've seen the Church of England try and modernise itself, but in the Western nations, but facing the same issues, dealing with African nations, just having none of it.
No, absolutely. And I think the Catholic Church is an institution, whatever one feels about it, whether someone is a believer or not, has been a kind of a stand against the kind of general cultural relativist drift that might exist. You might disagree with its fundamental principles and precepts, but still, under Francis, you start to see at least some of the kind of the mood music change. As I say, fundamentally, it's not as if there was some marked shift in relation to the Church's position on homosexuality, for instance, but the posture was slightly less judgmental than it might have been previously. So it just shows
churches should be judgy, though, shouldn't they?
Well, that's one of the things, isn't it? If you have a kind of
the point of church,
doctrinal
isn't it, to be
view
judgy?
of these things, then clearly an element of judgment comes into it. But at the same time, I think that's why it's such a significant institution, not least because it represents so many people around the world, 1.5 million, 1 billion of them, but also because of the fact that it clearly is coming under the same kind of political pressures and stresses and strains that, culturally speaking, that all of our institutions are. It's just
absolutely.
in a very different kind of setting.
Well, and again, was going to say, talking about men in dresses. Let's go on to another topic. I'm sorry.
You've been holding that one in all morning.
I've been holding that one in, but, I mean, it's just, I mean, again, I completely understand that 1.4 million people will be very much mourning this man's death, and it's 6 million Catholics in this country as well. His funeral's going to be on Saturday, and there was a lot of discussion. But again, I do think it's really important. If spiritual leaders, and we've had this with, virtually every single recent Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby wasn't the first. Spiritual leaders want to involve themselves in very divisive political topics, which they're entitled to do, then we're entitled to discuss them as effectively political figures rather than as religious figures. I think that is the case, and I think that discussion should be had. Let's talk about the men in dresses who were protesting at the weekend in Westminster. Incredibly horrific. I mean, absolutely horrific posters. The only good TERF, i.e., a woman who campaigns for women's rights. Oh, sorry about that, guys. Is a dead TERF. I'm changing some of the language. I heart weeing on TERFs. Again, women. Bring back witch burning, JK. And you're just jealous that my appendage is bigger than your boyfriend's and my breasts are bigger than yours. That's the sort of message from people men who are insisting that they are, in their minds, women and have the same rights as women. Now, we had defacing of statues, including the suffragist statue. We've had some appalling abuse online. I mean, a complete meltdown from the likes of, I'm not even going to name them, give them any dignity, but some of the biggest trans activists online who've been, by the way, abusing people, not just J.K. Rowling, but Maya Forstater, Helen Joyce, everyone else. They don't go for me largely. I mean, other than, you look like a man. I mean, again, well done. But, I mean, it just makes me laugh. It just makes me, you don't look like a woman. What's your point? I mean, what's your point? But I always find it fascinating who they go for and who they don't go for. But this horrific abuse. But I cannot believe a scenario where in broad daylight and a photograph on film that a bunch of women activists for women's rights held up the equivalent signs about trans people, that those women would not currently right now be behind bars. And yet those men are allowed to write that and say that. You've got government ministers like Chris Bryant and Angela Eagle in a private WhatsApp group talking about how the decision of the Supreme Court last week, how to undermine it, and criticising the chair of the Human Rights and Equalities Commission as appalling for stating men are not women and men need to use men's toilets, not women's toilets. I mean, how on earth have we got ourselves into a situation where yet again we've got a completely two-tier justice? It's
absolutely incredible, but it's what we've come to expect. I think this is a real mask-off moment for the trans activist movement.
Well, they do like to keep their masks on.
They do, that's true. But they're very health conscious, as we know. This is something where those of us who've been covering this, who've been following this, will be unsurprised by that outpouring of sort of violent misogyny that we saw on the streets over the weekend. But maybe now it's going to come to more public attention. You would just think that if you're running around Parliament Square or Manchester or wherever it is, holding up placards about hanging women, that's what the only good TERF is a dead TERF means. If you're going around defacing statues of suffragist trailblazers like Millicent Fawcett, if you're going around publicly urinating because you're so upset you're no longer allowed to use the women's toilets, maybe you're on the wrong side. That was the
just
one
maybe
thing that I would offer to them this morning as something for reflection. And I think it's demonstrated, as Bev Jackson from the LGBT Alliance was saying earlier, it's because this has always been a misogynistic movement. It's
not men who think they're women, it's men who hate women.
That is becoming impossible to deny, and it's something, unfortunately, which has been tolerated by people who should know better, people within the Labour Party. Chris Bryant finds this Supreme Court ruling appalling. Has he said anything about the appalling statements that we saw on our streets?
Oh, well, exactly. And again, there seems to be more concern for Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, about statues being defaced. But it's interesting, the Prime Minister today, speaking at a visit to a school, I wonder if he checked at the school if they had single-sex toilets for the girls who perhaps don't want to be changing with the boys. And as they
probably don't want Keir Starmer going around their toilets.
No, and they are legal. Well, I don't know. Apparently men think it's OK to hang around women's toilets. We saw some demonstrations at the weekend. But he made this statement. He said, I welcome the decision of the Supreme Court, which has given us clarity, much-needed clarity. And I think for those that are now drawing up guidance, it's a much clearer position. position. I'm really pleased that the court has now clarified the position. We can move on from there. Yeah, well, you want to move on from there, don't you? This is a man who has told us basically that, you know, you're a bad, evil person if you don't say that trans women are women. He's tried to have his cake and eat it on both sides. It ain't working out very well for him. He's backtracking. I don't believe a word the man says. We didn't need clarity. If he, as Prime Minister, or as leader of the opposition for many years, had simply said, you know, very, very simply, look, this is clearly not the case. Trans people don't have the right to steal, or trans men to steal women's rights to single-sex spaces. It's quite clear and obvious. We could have had that clarity long before now. I mean, you and I agree, in fact, all of our guests agree, and we discussed it ad nauseum last week. Because, you know, it is absurd that we needed judges to make a decision on this, because we all knew already, apart from, apparently, people like Keir Starmer. But at the end of the day, do you think anything's going to change? Because kids have gone back to school today after the Easter holidays. There are still going to be kids going into school and little girls in primary and in secondary school who are having to share toilets with boys when they've got a right not to. They're supposed to be single sex, you know, changing rooms. I've got no issue if there's no such thing as a trans kid, no such thing as a non-binary kid, you're a boy or a girl. But if some kids have been horribly just sucked into this world, either on YouTube or by parents trying to be woke at the latest dinner party, which always look at the parents, by the way, look at the parents, is that if they don't feel comfortable in either bathroom, well, you know what, there's a disabled loo, I'm sure, somewhere, or the teacher's loo, you can use that one, that's fine. But you don't get to use the girls' loo, because you're not a girl, you're a boy.
It's one of those things where the fight really kind of begins now. The thing that's changed is that parents who have been taking their schools to task over policies like this, organisations which have been pushing very firmly for places to actually uphold their legal obligations, it's now abundantly clear that the law is on their side. That will have an effect.
Start suing, everybody. Lawyer up. Start suing.
And also, that was another thing about this ideology, is it's crept in very quickly. It's taken over a lot of institutions, but in large part because of the concerted effort of certain activists and the ignorance and cowardice of leadership. Yeah. A lot of those people will turn on a dime once they realise that they can no longer, that the game is up, that this isn't going to be worth their while. So I am slightly more hopeful in the fact that there's still work to be done, but there is still work to be done, you know, I think is the
I'm not as hopeful as you. I'm really not as hopeful for you, but there we are. Bridget Phillipson, who's the Equality and Women's Minister, again, I don't know why, and Women's, you know, it's like as if these are separate things. She was out and about today. What she wanted to talk about was the free breakfast clubs to open at 750 schools. The plan is that is going to be spread out across the whole country. But we've had a lot of that in, you know, I think London's got the free breakfast clubs paid for, by the way. Not free, paid for by the taxpayers. But this is from Tuesday today. Thousands of parents can access half an hour of free morning childcare as part of the trial. It's going to run to July. They're going to have an expected national rollout. But basically they want free breakfast clubs in every English primary school, and funding is now at 30 million. The scheme will give parents of primary age children up to 95 additional hours of care, save them £450 per year in childcare costs. Now, it's been welcomed by Head Teachers Union. Lots of schools already do this already. I don't understand why this shouldn't be, I don't understand why this should be free. I don't understand why the schools should be giving the kids breakfast when parents can afford to pay for breakfast themselves. I don't think there's a single parent in this country who can't afford breakfast. I've spoken to numerous parents on minimum wages, on benefits, single parents. I've got a lot of friends and family who are single parents who never had to struggle putting a piece of toast or a bowl of cereal in front of their kid of a school day. But we know there are kids who go to school without food. We know that. But that's a parenting issue. Should that become a school issue and an issue for everyone else to pay for?
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think this really comes out of the quite paternalistic nature of the Labour Party now, where it kind of sees as its role to take a even greater interest in the raising of children, even the feeding of children. And I think sometimes it's partly motivated by not trusting parents to feed them the right kinds of things as well, which is often a sort of under.
Well, school meals used to be the most unhealthy meal you'd have.
No, absolutely. I mean, those days are unfortunately over from what I can tell. But it's the sort of thing where if one wanted to make the case for this on the basis of it's basically a form of kind of extra free, not free because people pay for it obviously, but it's an extra form of childcare. There's also some breakfast provision, that would be one thing. But because of the fact that in the context of everything else that's going on economically, you kind of think that's it. Like, if you really want to help working people who are really struggling under the cost that they're now having to face, under the horrendous economic circumstances we've had since COVID in particular. Is this really the focus? Shouldn't you be focused on actually creating an economy in which they could have more gainful employment?
Well, again,
and things like childcare and food
yeah,
prices.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, look, you know, it is the case now that, you know, 70%, why can't people feed their kids at home? 70% of mums, I mean, you know, most dads, but 70% of mums of children at primary school do actually work, and many full time, and therefore they really are struggling. And again, you know, you have to be at work much earlier than it would take you to drop your kid off at school at the normal school opening hours and then get to work in terms of your travel time, so it makes it difficult. And I'm all for having some sort of club and schools allowing kids to arrive early and you know, and give parents that little bit of leeway so they can carry on, you know, with the job as well. And again, I think kids having working parents who get up in the morning and go off and do and pay their way is very, very important. We know kids do better in those homes, but I just think we are taking away so much of the duties of parents. I mean, teaching kids how to clean their teeth. Kids are turning up at school now at the age of almost 5 years old, still in nappies. They can't sit upright. They can't hold a pencil. They've never seen a book. You know, they don't know how to follow instructions. They don't know how to take turns. I mean, this is basic parenting. I mean, I'm trying to move away from being quite nanny state in my soul in terms of, but there is there are good ways and bad ways to raise a child. And anyone who's got a child, or got friends who've got children and family members, will know what works and what doesn't. It's not actually that complicated. There's routine, there's rules, there's discipline. And I don't mean hitting your kid, I mean just expectations of behaviour. There's, you know, it's the food you give them. And no, it doesn't have to be expensive. Vegetables are very cheap, you know, and it's all this stuff. And, you know, bedtime, things like that, you know, and it's just talking to your kids. Put your sodding phone down and read your kid a book. You know, this is basic stuff, and we are taking more and more away. At this point, I think we should just have kids who just go into little pods, we give them an iPad, and then someone else takes care of them, and parents have nothing to do with them. That's the way we're going.
And especially where the school is concerned, if you think about so many different areas, they're now kind of involved in teaching kids, you know, like kind of life skills in a way that wasn't previously necessary. Mental health. There's often
relationships.
A lot of sex and relationship education has been widely expanded, far beyond the kind of birds and the bees and the kind of, you know, necessary bits of information that you might want to impart through to it really become a discussion about something that really should only be between parents and children. And it's the problem is, the more you feed this, the more there's an appetite for it, in a sense. The more people turn let school deal with that. The state to handle it. And it's also just an overload on the education system. I mean, in some of the reports around this Breakfast Club plan, a lot of them saying, is the funding actually going to come through? Are we going to have to start shouldering the cost for it? Teachers now have to be social workers. They have to be gender ideology experts until about 5 minutes ago. They have to deal with all these things. Meanwhile, there are kids who are struggling to come out of school knowing how to read and write effectively.
So maybe we should focus
on that, would be my proposal.
Why don't parents do the parenting and schools do the teaching, and let's see how that works out. And here's a top tip, parents. If you don't want to spend time with your kid, and you don't want to actually feed your kid and read to your kid and spend time with your kid and talk to your kid, put them to bed at the right time and all that, maybe don't have a kid. I mean, I don't know, big part of feminism. I mean, one of the most amazing things that ever happened to women was the contraceptive pill, was the ability to control your own fertility. If you don't want a kid, don't have a kid. Once you've had a kid, do the job properly and stop expecting the teachers to do it for you. Oh, and me as a taxpayer to pay for it. Your lesson from Julia today.